Hey guys, tonight we are going to step back nearly 1,000 years past the hum of traffic and glow of screens, past the rush of emails and coffee queues into a world where the air smells of damp earth. The nights are lit by flickering rushlights, and the only sound outside your door after dark is the distant hoot of an owl or the restless stamping of a tethered horse. You're standing on a muddy lane in a medieval village surrounded by timber-framed houses with thatched roofs that look like they've been there forever. The smell of wood smoke drifts through the chill evening air, and somewhere a dog is barking, or maybe warning you because you probably won't survive this. So before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. While you're at it, tell me in the comments where in the world you are right now and what time it is where you are listening. Now, dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. The road beneath your feet isn't paved. It's not even graveled. It's a churned track of mud and straw compacted by generations of bare feet, ox carts, and occasional riders clattering through on the way to somewhere more important. You can hear your own breathing and the crunch squelch of your boots as you walk toward the cluster of houses that make up the heart of this village. The air is cold, not freezing, but that damp, bone-deep kind of chill that never seems to go away in medieval England or France or Germany, because villages everywhere had this same stubborn weather. The houses themselves are small, uneven, and charming if you're feeling generous, haphazard if you're not. Wattle and daub walls bulge slightly between their wooden frames. The thatch is thick, bound down with ropes, though every now and then a bird pops its head out from a gap. Because yes, the roof is also their home. Some homes lean precariously toward their neighbors, as if gossiping over the street. Chickens wander about freely scratching for grain or anything remotely edible, and geese eye you with suspicious intensity. You pass the blacksmith's hut, easy to spot, from the rhythmic clang of hammer on metal, the orange glow spilling out from the open doorway, and the smell half-burnt charcoal, half something metallic and sharp. This is one of the few real industries in the village. The smith repairs plows, fashions nails, and even shapes the occasional sword or spearhead when the local lord calls for them. But most of his work is far more mundane, shoeing horses, mending hinges, crafting iron hoops for barrels. In a world without hardware stores, he's indispensable. Further down the lane, the smell shifts. There's the warm, slightly sour scent of baking bread. The communal oven is going, and a couple of women stand nearby chatting quietly while they wait their turn. In a village like this, most people don't have their own oven. They mix dough at home, carry it here, and bake it in turns. It's not free. The lord or the oven keeper will take a portion of your loaf as payment. You notice the bread is heavy brown and dense, made from a mix of wheat rye or barley, whatever grain could be grown locally. The finest white bread. That's for nobility, not for you. Children dart between doorways barefooted despite the chill, their tunics flapping as they chase one another. They're quick to stare at you, strangers are rare, and then they vanish again like shadows. Their play is simple sticks for swords, scraps of cloth for dolls. There's laughter, but also chores waiting for them. Even at 8 years old, they'll fetch water, watch geese, or help grind grain. Childhood here doesn't last long. You move toward the center of the village where a slightly wider patch of ground opens up. This is the green not in the manicured lawn sense, but a shared space where people gather. The green might host a small market once a week, or seasonal fairs when traders from outside appear with bolts of cloth metal pus, or the occasional luxury like dried figs. The rest of the time, it's just a place to pass through. Right now, a couple of villagers are repairing a cartwheel, while another group works together splitting logs for the coming winter. Off to one side stands the church, the most solid building in the village. Its stone walls make it seem almost eternal compared to the wooden houses, and the bell tower is the tallest structure you can see. Inside it smells of beeswax and incense. The priest is both spiritual guide and often the only literate person around. The church isn't just for Sunday Mass. It's the record keeper, the meeting hall, and sometimes even the village's one source of moral arbitration when disputes arise. As you wander further, you notice the rhythms of life here are dictated not by clocks, but by the sun, the seasons, and the church calendar. The bell might ring for services, but most people simply work until the light fades and then stop. There's no rush hour, no 9 to 5, just dawn to dusk labor. In summer, the days are long and relentless. In winter, short and grim. And yet there's a quiet steadiness to it all. Everyone knows their role. You pass a small fenced plot, the vegetable garden of one household. Cabbages, leeks, and beans grow in neat rows, though weeds poke through stubbornly. Beside it, a pig snuffles in the dirt. This pig isn't a pet. At some point in late autumn, it will be slaughtered, and every part will be used: meat salted for winter fat, rendered for cooking, skin for leather. Waste is a luxury no one can afford. Nearby, the low-thatched structure of a byre holds a couple of cows. Milk is precious, churned into butter, or made into hard cheese that lasts through the lean months. In some homes, the animals actually share the living space, separated only by a rough partition. Their body heat is a welcome bonus in the cold months, though the smell is memorable. Life here isn't romantic. It's hard. Survival depends on the land, the weather, and the goodwill of neighbors. A failed harvest can mean hunger. Disease can sweep through without warning. You can't simply move to the next town for a job. You're tied to your lord's land, working his fields in exchange for the right to farm your own small strip. Most villagers are peasants, some free, many serfs, bound by obligation. Your taxes aren't paid in coins, but in days of labor, produce, or livestock. Still, there's community. In the evening, the village comes alive with small gatherings. Someone might bring out a lute or pipe, and voices rise in song ballads about saints, lovers, or battles long past. The light of tallow candles flickers in windows, and the smell of wood smoke hangs over the rooftops. If you stand still, you can almost feel the heartbeat of the place, steady and unchanging, as it has been for centuries. And now, as the last daylight fades, you head toward the small wooden door of the cottage where you'll sleep tonight. The inside is dim, lit only by the fire in the hearth. A pot of pottage, a stew of whatever vegetables and grains are at hand, simmers slowly. There's no chimney, so smoke curls into the rafters before drifting out through gaps in the roof. The single room holds everything: a bed frame stuffed with straw, a bench, a chest for clothing, and maybe a few treasured possessions: a wooden spoon, a pewter cup, a scrap of colored cloth. You settle onto the bench, the fire warming your knees, and listen to the muffled sounds of the village outside. Somewhere a dog barks again. The wind rattles the thatch above you. And in this moment, you are as much a part of this medieval village as anyone who was born here. The fire in the hearth settles into a quieter glow, crackling softly as you stretch your legs toward it. There's no sense of nightlife here, no pubs, spilling music into the street, no lamp-lit cafes or bustling markets under the moon. Once darkness takes the village, the place closes in on itself. Outside, the lanes are almost invisible, only faintly outlined by starlight or the pale wash of the moon when it manages to push through drifting clouds. The soundscape changes after sundown. The murmur of voices fades behind shuttered windows. Dogs growl now and then, but otherwise you hear the night creatures' owls with their questioning hoots, the faint rustle of small things in the grass, the occasional whinny from the stable. The village is wrapped in a kind of hushed vigilance because the dark is not just inconvenient, it's risky. There's no street lighting. If you must be outside, you carry a torch or lantern, but even then, shadows crowd around you. People here fear more than just tripping over a rut in the lane. There's the chance of thieves or worse spirits and creatures the old tales insist still roam after dusk. Rational or not, such fears keep most folk inside once the sun dips. Even the blacksmith's forge and the communal oven go quiet long before midnight. This is a world that belongs to the day. In your host's cottage, the family moves through the familiar motions of night. The wooden shutters are pulled tight. The pot of pottage is ladled into wooden bowls, the thick, warm stew carrying the taste of the day's effort. Bread is sliced rough and dense, dipped into the broth. Conversation is soft, unhurried. There's no rush to finish. The day is done. After the meal, the family shifts into the sleeping arrangements. It's one room, so privacy is a concept more than a reality. A straw-filled mattress lies along one wall, parents and small children together. Older children or other relatives might use a second mattress or a pile of blankets on the floor. The fire is banked low to keep embers glowing until morning, because rekindling a fire from scratch is a nuisance and in winter downright miserable. You lie down, pulling a woolen blanket over yourself. It's scratchy but warm. Outside the village exhales into sleep. You can smell the faint blend of smoke, wool, and hay. For a while, the creak of the rafters above you and the steady breathing around you merge into a kind of rural lullaby. And soon you're asleep too, though not for the whole night. In medieval times, people often slept in 2 shifts. It's the middle of the night when you wake naturally. No candle is lit. There's just the orange whisper of embers. Someone stirs to use the chamber pot, a wooden bucket discreetly tucked into a corner. You shift and settle again. Between these first and second sleeps, people might pray quietly, talk in low voices, or even step outside to check on animals. Then the second round of sleep carries you to morning, and morning is never quiet for long. The cockerel begins first, loud, insistent, not caring whether you've had enough rest. You hear the animals in the byre shifting, lowing, calling for feed. The air is cool and carries the smell of damp soil. The cottage stirs to life quickly. Your host is up pulling on rough woolen hose and a tunic feet slipping into leather shoes. The women of the household begin preparing a morning meal, not a lavish breakfast. Just leftover bread may be warmed near the fire and perhaps a bit of cheese or ale. Yes, ale in the morning. It's weak, closer to a nourishing barley drink than what you might think of as beer, but it's safer than water, which can be questionable at best. Children eat quickly because there's work waiting. Everyone has something to do. The eldest son goes to tend the cows milking before they're turned out to pasture. Another heads to the chicken pen to scatter feed, making sure to collect any eggs. The youngest are sent to fetch water from the well. It's a short walk, but one that will be repeated several times a day because a household uses more water than you think for cooking, cleaning, brewing, and the animals. You step outside the morning light falling across the uneven lane. The village smells fresher now, wood smoke mingling with the earthy scent of damp thatch and turned soil. Somewhere the miller is already at work, the low rumble of the water mill, a steady background note. If you walk toward it, you'd see the wheel turning slowly, powered by the stream that skirts the edge of the village. The miller's job is critical. People bring their grain to be ground into flour here, and he takes a portion as payment, a right he guards fiercely. Meanwhile, in the fields beyond the last cottages, laborers are already at work. This might be plowing season, with oxen pulling heavy wooden plows across the ridged earth, guided by men who lean into their work with practiced rhythm. Or it might be sowing season seed broadcast by hand in sweeping arcs. Later in the year, it will be harvest, a back-breaking all-hands-on-deck affair when the village lives or starves by the weather. Women's work is equally relentless. While some join in the fields, many remain in the village to tend gardens, spin wool, weave cloth, churn butter, or make repairs to clothing. There's no such thing as idleness here if your hands aren't working. They're mending, sewing, shelling beans, or preparing herbs for cooking or medicine. Every task carries a rhythm, and over the days and weeks, these rhythms blend into a pattern so ancient, it feels like breathing. The clang of the blacksmith's hammer, the splash of water at the well, the soft whir of a spinning wheel, the clatter of wooden buckets. Yet within these routines, there's also a deep reliance on the community. Neighbors help one another repairing roofs, sharing tools, watching over children. The village is a web of mutual dependence. A family falling ill might find meals delivered by others. During harvest, entire households work side by side until the last sheaf is bound. By late morning, the sun climbs higher. In summer, this means warmth that seeps into your shoulders as you walk the lanes. In winter, the sun offers little heat, but its light still sharpens the outlines of roofs and trees against the pale sky. The work continues regardless. There's no calling in sick unless you're truly unable to stand, and even then, someone will likely drag you into the daylight to do light chores. You stop for a moment at the edge of a field, watching a man scything tall grass for hay. Each swing is slow and precise, the blade hissing through the stems. Behind him, another gathers the cut grass into heaps. It's for the animals' winter fodder stored in the barn, so cows and sheep survive when snow covers the pasture. Somewhere nearby, you hear the sound of laughter. A group of women is washing clothes in the stream, beating wet linen against flat stones. The water is icy, but they talk and joke as they work. Soap is scarce. They use lye made from wood ash or a mash of herbs. The garments, once rinsed, will be spread over bushes or laid on the grass to bleach in the sun. This is not a life of ease, but it has its moments. The way the sunlight glances off the water, the shared joke over an awkward tumble into the mud, the warm bread fresh from the communal oven. It's these small things that make the labor bearable. And as the day edges toward midday, the village pulses with the steady certainty that everything being done, every furrow turned, every bucket filled, every garment scrubbed, is not just work, it's survival. By midday, the pace of the village shifts slightly. The morning's urgency mellows, though work never truly stops. You hear the steady scrape of hoes in the gardens, the thud of an axe splitting firewood, the low hum of voices carrying across the lanes. But as you look around, you notice something else. Every action, every week, every month here bends to an invisible but undeniable structure, the great cycle of the seasons and the church calendar. It's not the ticking of clocks that orders your life, there aren't any to speak of. Instead, it's the wheel of the year, an intricate dance between the practical needs of farming and the sacred feasts dictated by the church. Spring means plowing, sowing, and lambing. Summer brings the long, exhausting days of weeding, haymaking, and tending crops. Autumn is the frantic, desperate race of harvest, when all hands, old, young, hale, and half-lame, are in the fields until the last sheaf is bound. Winter slows the fields, but not the people. There's mending to do, animals to feed, and stores to guard. And woven through it all are the holy days, not holidays in the modern sense, though they do break the routine. You can count on them the way you count on the sunrise. Sundays are sacrosanct work pauses for Mass, and the village gathers in the cool dimness of the church. The sound of the bell calling you to worship carries over the fields like a gentle but firm summons. Inside you kneel on the worn floorboards, listening to the Latin prayers, even if you don't understand the words. The priest's voice rises and falls, and sunlight filters through narrow windows to paint pale stripes on the stone. Beyond the weekly Mass are the feast days of saints, the great festivals of the liturgical year. Candlemas in February, when candles are blessed, and light is welcomed back after winter's darkness. Easter in spring, marked by processions, extra baking, and a sense of renewal that matches the greening of the fields. Pentecost with its garlands of fresh flowers and the air smelling of hawthorn. Then there are the harvest celebrations. In late summer or early autumn, when the grain is finally gathered, the village might hold a small feast. Bread is baked from the new flour, ale flows more freely, and songs rise into the evening air. It's not just about joy, it's gratitude, relief, and the hope that winter will be kind. And Christmas, a different creature entirely from the candle-lit domestic scene you might know. It stretches across 12 days each with its own observances. The church glows with greenery, holly, ivy, perhaps a few evergreen boughs. Feasts are held where possible, though the menu depends entirely on what the larder can spare. You might have roasted goose-spiced ale and a pudding of dried fruit, if the year has been generous, or something much simpler if it hasn't. These feast days are not optional distractions. They are anchors. In a life of constant toil, they give you something to mark time by, something to anticipate. They are also moments when the whole community comes together, whether in solemn procession or shared celebration. Even those who rarely speak beyond polite nods during the working week will laugh, sing, or at least exchange greetings tongues when garlands are strung across the village green. But the church's influence isn't limited to feast days. It pervades daily existence in quieter ways. The very rhythm of your week is shaped by its teachings, not just the Sunday rest, but the fast days when meat is forbidden. Lent, that long season of restraint, pares down the diet even further. The calendar is a tapestry of fasting and feasting, each thread tied to a spiritual lesson. And there's more than just public worship. The church is also your guide in birth, marriage, and death. Baptism welcomes new life into the community. Weddings modest by modern standards still draw neighbors to watch the vows and share in the simple meal that follows. Funerals gather the whole village in mourning, and remembrance the tolling bell marking the passage from this world to the next. Even the land itself is blessed in rituals that blend the sacred and the practical. At Rogatiantide in spring, the priest leads the villagers in walking the boundaries of the parish, blessing the fields and praying for good harvests. This is not just piety, it's insurance in a world where weather and disease can undo a year's work in days. There's a deep comfort in this predictability. You know when the next feast will come, when the next fast will begin. You know that in May the hedgerows will foam with blossom, and the air will be sweet with wild garlic. You know that in October the fields will lie bare under a pale sun, and your evenings will be scented with wood smoke and damp earth. You might not own a calendar, but you carry one in your bones. And yet the year isn't all work and church. Sometimes in the quieter months, there are fairs often tied to a saint's day that transform the village green into a swirl of color and sound. Traders arrive with bolts of cloth in colors you rarely see, glazed pottery trinkets from distant places. Children gape at the juggler or the man with trained dancing bears. Musicians strike up lively tunes, and for a day or two the routine loosens its grip. If you have a few coins, a rare luxury, you might buy something small, a bright ribbon, a polished wooden comb, a pouch of spice. If you have none, you still wander taste samples and soak in the novelty. These fairs are reminders that however isolated your village might feel most of the time, the wider world is still out there full of strange wonders, peril, and promise. But even as you walk among the stalls, the church is never far away. The fair might open with a blessing. A saint's relic might be displayed for veneration. It's a reminder that no matter how festive the day life here always curves back toward the sacred. As the afternoon sun tilts, people begin to drift back to their homes. The traders pack their goods. The village exhales, slipping back into its quieter rhythm. The bells may ring again, calling you to evening prayer, and you find yourself stepping once more into the cool shadows of the church, the air thick with incense and the faint echo of sung psalms. Outside, the light is fading. Tomorrow the pattern resumes, work in the fields, tending animals, fetching water. But the memory of the feast or the fair lingers a small warmth to carry into the next stretch of labor. And so you begin to see in this medieval village, life is not a flat expanse of endless work. It's a rolling landscape of toil and celebration, of sacred observance and earthy necessity. The seasons turn the bell's toll, and the village walks the same ancient path year after year, a path you are now walking too. Evening has drawn the village into quiet shadow, and you find yourself back at the doorway of your host's home, a structure you've seen from the outside, but whose details become clearer the longer you live within its timber-framed embrace. You push the wooden door, heavy, uneven, and hung on simple iron hinges, and step into the dim interior. The first thing you notice is that the home is not sealed against the outside world the way you might expect. There are gaps in the walls where the wattle and daub hasn't been perfectly pressed, small chinks in the thatch where a bird or two might find its way in. The air inside is never entirely free of the scents and sounds of the village wood smoke livestock, the faint hum of insects in summer. The floor under your feet is hard-packed earth. In wealthier homes, it might be covered with wooden planks, but here, the soil itself is beaten flat, strewn with rushes or straw to soften each step and to absorb spills. These rushes are changed periodically, though periodically might mean when the smell demands it, rather than any strict schedule. Beneath the fresh layer, older rushes are a mix of crushed stems, food scraps, and whatever the household has dropped or spilled over weeks and months. It is, to be blunt, not a spotless environment, but no one here expects it to be. The heart of the room is the open hearth, set in the middle or slightly toward one wall. It is the source of warmth, light, and most of your cooking. There's no chimney, not yet, not in houses of this size. Instead, the smoke curls upward into the rafters, staining the beams black before drifting out through gaps in the roof or eaves. On cold days, this makes the home wonderfully warm, but your eyes water and your lungs itch until you're used to it. In summer, the smoke is less welcome, but you still keep a small fire going for cooking. The cooking arrangements are simple. A blackened pot hangs from a chain or tripod above the coals, suspended so you can raise or lower it, depending on whether you're boiling, simmering, or just keeping something warm. Flat stones near the edge of the fire serve as makeshift shelves for warming bread or drying herbs. Cooking here is as much about managing the fire as about stirring the pot. Around the room, furniture is sparse and homemade. A sturdy wooden table scarred with knife marks stands near the hearth. Benches serve as both seating and occasional work surfaces. A chest against one wall holds clothing blankets and perhaps a few small valuables. A pewter cup, a polished horn, comb, a clasp or brooch that has been passed down for generations. There's no clutter in the modern sense, but every object earns its place. Beds are another matter. A frame, if the household can afford it, holds a mattress stuffed with straw or dried reeds, sometimes mixed with herbs like lavender or mint to deter insects. Woolen blankets or animal skins provide warmth. In poorer homes, bedding is nothing more than a pile of straw in a corner, covered with a rough cloth. Sleeping is communal. The family, sometimes even servants or lodgers, share close quarters. Privacy is not a luxury you know here. Light in the evenings comes from the fire and from tallow candles. These are not the sweet beeswax candles reserved for churches or wealthy homes. Tallow-rendered animal fat gives a steady but smoky light and a smell you learn to tolerate. For the poorest, even candles are rare. Instead, they use rush lights, strips of dried rush pith, dipped in fat and burned slowly. These last perhaps half an hour each and must be replaced often. In one corner, you might notice tools leaning against the wall, a hoe, a rake, perhaps a wooden bucket. There's no separate shed. The home holds everything important. A spindle and distaff for spinning wool rest near the bench, and skeins of yarn hang from a peg. Every task begins and ends here: mending clothes, storing food, carving wooden spoons, drying bundles of herbs gathered from the hedgerows. If you step back outside, you can see how the home is made. The wooden framework, oak or elm, is set into the ground or onto simple stone footings. Between the timbers, woven branches form the wattle covered in daub, made from a mix of clay straw and animal dung. It's surprisingly effective at keeping out wind and rain, though the surface needs patching over time. The roof is thick thatch layers of reeds or straw, tied tightly sloped to shed water. A good thatch can last years if maintained, but it must be watched for leaks, rot, and unwelcome animal tenants. Every home in the village shares these essential features, though some are larger, some more neatly kept. A wealthier peasant might have 2 rooms instead of 1, or even an upper floor reached by a steep ladder. The lord's steward or reeve might live in something approaching comfort, with wooden floors, a proper chimney, and glazed windows in the main hall. But for most, the essentials are the same: shelter from the weather, a hearth for heat, and space enough to sleep, cook, and store what you cannot carry. the outdoor space is just as important. Behind the house, a small yard holds a pen for pigs or chickens, perhaps a kitchen garden with cabbages, onions, and leeks. Herbs grow in neat clusters near the door, sage for flavor, mint for medicine, thyme for both. In summer, laundry hangs on lines between posts. In winter, it's draped over the rafters indoors, stiff and slow to dry. Inside, the walls are bare except for what you need. A bundle of dried herbs may hang near the hearth to sweeten the air or keep pests at bay. A small wooden cross or religious image might be placed prominently, a daily reminder of faith in a life where uncertainty is constant. If the family owns a small illustrated prayer book, it is treasured, though few can read it. The house is not silent. There's the constant creak of beams in the wind, the distant cluck of hens, the muffled snuffling of a pig rooting in the yard. In winter, the patter of rain on the thatch becomes a companionable sound, reminding you that you are warm and dry, or at least warmer and drier than you'd be outside. In summer, the door stands open, letting in the smell of cut grass, the hum of insects, the occasional wandering chicken. This is not the kind of home where you retreat from the world. It is where the world meets you. Work and rest, waking and sleeping, prayer and play all happen in this one shared space. Its walls hold not just a family, but their whole way of life. And as you settle by the hearth, watching the light flicker across the beams, you begin to feel how deeply this home roots you to the village itself. Morning finds you once again outside where the heart of medieval life truly beats the open fields. These are not private fenced-in plots like the neat farms you might picture today. Instead, the village's arable land is divided into great open strips, part of a shared system that everyone depends on. Your family holds rights to a few long, narrow strips scattered across these fields, each one a thin slice of the village's breadbasket. They are not clustered together. The scattering helps spread risk if one area suffers blight or flooding. You walk toward them along a rutted track, the smell of damp earth rising as the morning sun warms the dew. From here, you can see the whole layout, 3 great fields, each used differently, according to a simple but vital pattern. One is planted with winter grain wheat or rye sown in the autumn, and now pushing green shoots through the soil. Another holds spring crops like barley oats or peas sown just weeks ago. The third lies fallow resting to regain its strength, though even here livestock graze, leaving behind the manure that will feed next year's crop. This 3-field rotation is the village's insurance policy. Without it, the soil would quickly tire and harvests would fail. And failure here is no small matter. A poor yield means hunger, sometimes famine. You've heard the old stories, years when bread was scarce, when people boiled nettles or chewed bark to keep something in their bellies. That fear is never far from the surface. Work begins early. The plowmen guide their heavy wooden plows through the earth, the blades cutting narrow furrows, turning dark soil to the sun. Oxen strain in their yokes, breath steaming in the cool air. The creak of harness leather and the low commands of the driver punctuate the steady rhythm of their progress. Oxen are slow but steady, and unlike horses, they can survive on rougher fodder, an important consideration when every stalk of hay is precious. In another part of the field, men with hoes and mattocks break up clumps of soil, pull weeds, and clear stones. Women and children follow with baskets of seeds, scattering it in broad arcs. There's an art to this, too close together, and the plants will choke each other. Too far apart, and weeds will win the battle for space. Afterwards, the field may be lightly harrowed with a wooden rake or dragged by a simple frame of branches to cover the seeds and protect them from hungry birds. Tools are few and precious. The plow is the most valuable shared between families if need be. Hoes, sickles, scythes, wooden forks, and rakes fill out the basic kit. Most are made or repaired locally by the blacksmith. A broken tool at the wrong time can mean disaster, so care is taken to mend rather than replace. Every tool is stored carefully oiled or wrapped to keep rust and rot at bay. Through the growing season, there is constant tending. Weeds are pulled, gaps are resown, pests are chased away. Children spend long hours scaring birds from the fields, waving their arms, clapping boards together, or shouting until their voices grow hoarse. Without this, flocks of crows or pigeons can strip a field in hours. Then comes the harvest, the most demanding time of all. If you're cutting grain, you use a sickle, a short-handled curved blade perfect for hooking and slicing the stems near the ground. The work is backbreaking. You stoop, cut, gather, bundle. The bundles, called sheaves, are tied and stacked in shocks to dry in the sun. Everyone works, men, women, children, even the old who carry bundles or tie the cords. The air is full of dust and the warm, grassy scent of drying grain. The harvested grain is taken to the threshing floor, where it is beaten with flails to loosen the kernels from the stalks. The chaff is separated by tossing the grain into the air and letting the wind carry the lighter husks away, a process called winnowing. The clean grain is then stored in sacks or bins, guarded against damp, vermin, and theft. Haymaking for the animals is just as crucial. In high summer, meadows are cut with long-handled scythes, the swish of the blade a steady song through the heat. The cut grass is turned several times to dry, then gathered into haystacks or crammed into lofts above barns. Without enough hay, your livestock will not survive the winter. And without livestock, the fields themselves will fail. No manure, no plow pullers, no milk. The weather rules all. A wet summer can rot the grain before it ripens. A dry one can shrivel it in the stalk. Early frost can steal the harvest days before cutting. Every cloud on the horizon is read with a farmer's wary eye. There are charms, blessings, and prayers for good weather, but in truth, it's the luck of the year that decides whether the granaries will be full or empty. Alongside the great fields, smaller gardens and orchards provide vegetables, fruit, and herbs. You might tend leeks, onions, beans, and peas close to home where you can keep an eye on them. Apple and pear trees yield fruit for eating fresh or for preserving. In good years, surplus produce might be traded at the market or dried for winter use. Farming life is not a solitary affair. Field work is often communal, entire families working side by side, singing, to keep time, sharing tools, swapping news. When a neighbor falls behind, others step in because the village's survival depends on every plot being sown and reaped. A failed field drags down the whole community. By late afternoon, the sun slants low, gilding the stubble left after harvest, or casting long shadows between the green rows of a summer crop. Tools are gathered, oxen led home, baskets emptied. The day's labor leaves your body, sore hands, blistered back, aching, but it also leaves you with a deep physical satisfaction. You've moved one step closer to keeping hunger from your door. And as you walk back toward the village, the sound of the mill comes faintly on the breeze, turning the day's grain into tomorrow's bread. The scent of wood smoke meets you halfway, promising a warm fire and a pot of stew. In this medieval life, the fields are not just your work. They are your lifeline, your measure of the year, your bond with the land that owns you as much as you own it. If the fields are the village's breadbasket, the animals are its heartbeat. They're not just scenery on the edges of your workday. They are partners' assets, and in some ways the insurance policy against hard times. Without them, the fields can't be plowed milk, and eggs disappear from the diet, and manure, the lifeblood of next year's crops, is lost. The day for animals begins before dawn. The first sound you hear might not be the cockerel, but the low, insistent bellow of a cow ready to be milked. In the dim light, you step into the byre, a low thatched shelter attached to the side or back of the house. The air is warm with the smell of hay and the damp sweetness of animal breath. The cows, tethered loosely in their stalls, stamp and shift their flanks, steaming in the chill morning air. Milking is steady, practiced work. You settle on a low stool, press your forehead lightly against the cow's side, and draw the warm milk into a wooden pail. It's a sound you come to know well, the soft hiss and splash as the milk streams. This fresh milk will be drunk right away, churned into butter, or set to curdle for cheese. In summer, when cows give more milk than you can use immediately, you might make a harder cheese that will keep through winter. The pigs are next. They're kept in a small pen, or in some places allowed to roam the forest edges to forage. Pigs will eat almost anything, kitchen scraps, wind-fallen fruit acorns, and they turn it all into rich meat. Their grunts rise in greeting or complaint as you approach with a bucket of scraps. They root through it eagerly, snuffling and squealing in satisfaction. Come autumn, one or more will be slaughtered, and every part used meat, salted or smoked fat, rendered into lard for cooking skin turned to leather, even the bladder used as a storage pouch. Chickens and geese wander the yard freely, pecking at stray grains, scratching in the dirt for insects. Eggs are gathered daily, though in winter, the supply may dwindle as the birds rest from laying. Feathers are kept for stuffing bedding or making quills, and geese in particular are valued for their meat as well. Sheep are more than just sources of meat. Their wool is the backbone of clothing and trade. In spring, shearing is a communal effort, the fleece rolled and bundled, sent for cleaning and spinning. The smell of raw wool is strong, a blend of lanolin and earth, but it holds the promise of warm garments against the winter cold. Sheep graze in the common pasture, or on the fallow fields, trimming the grass and fertilizing the ground as they go. Horses are rare for most peasants, though the lord's estate might keep a few sturdy destriers for war and lighter horses for riding. You might have access to a small, stocky draft horse for plowing, if fortune smiles, but for most heavy work, oxen are preferred, slower, yes, but hardier and cheaper to keep. Geese, ducks, and even bees have their place in the village economy. Ducks forage well in wet areas and provide both eggs and meat. Bees kept in simple skeps, dome-shaped baskets, yield honey, the only reliable sweetener available, and wax for candles. Honey is precious not just for flavor, but for its preservative qualities in cooking and brewing. Caring for livestock is not just feeding them in the morning and calling it done. There's a constant watchfulness. You check their hooves for stones or rot their coats for signs of mange or parasites. In winter, fodder is rationed carefully, too much too soon, and you'll run out before spring. Too little, and the animals will weaken or die. The loss of even one cow or ox can ripple through the whole year's work. Seasonal routines shape animal care as much as they do field work. In spring, cows and sheep are turned out to pasture lean from the winter, but quick to fatten on fresh grass. Pigs are led into the woods to forage. Calves, lambs, and piglets arrive, and the village green briefly becomes a nursery. In summer, the animals roam widely, grazing in the heat and resting in whatever shade they can find. Water must be fetched or led to them if streams run low. Autumn is a time of reckoning. Which animals will be kept through the winter and which will be slaughtered to save on feed. The decision is practical even if it's not easy. Meat from the slaughter is preserved in every way possible, salted, smoked, dried, or made into sausages that can be stored for months. The hides are cleaned and tanned for leather sinew, saved for thread horns, for tools or drinking vessels. Winter is the hardest season for livestock and their keepers alike. Animals are brought in closer to the village, sheltered in buyers' barns or sheds. Hay and stored fodder are doled out carefully. You rise early to feed them, and sometimes again before bed. The animals are quieter in winter, conserving their energy, and their presence in or near the home is a source of warmth, though the mingled smell of livestock and humans in close quarters is something you simply learn to accept. There's a certain bond that forms over time. You learn each cow's temperament, each pig's quirks, each chicken's stubborn favorite roost. They are not pets. Sentiment is tempered by the knowledge that most of them will one day be food, but they are still familiar companions in the rhythm of your life. When you stand in the yard at dusk, watching the geese settle themselves, or hearing the slow chewing of the cows in their stalls, there's a quiet sense of continuity. The same routines have played out here for generations and will continue long after you're gone. The fields might change with the seasons, but the animals are always there, moving, eating, working, giving, and in their own way, holding the village together. Food here isn't a matter of choice. It's a matter of what the land, the season, and the year have allowed you to have. There is no shop where you browse dozens of options, no pantry stacked with tins and packets to last months. In a medieval village, you eat what you grow, what you keep, and what you can preserve. And when those stores run low, you stretch them until the next harvest. The backbone of your diet is bread. Heavy, dense loaves made from whatever grain you've been able to grow or obtain wheat, if you're lucky more often, barley, rye, or a mix of all three. In years when wheat is scarce, the bread darkens and grows coarser, sometimes bulked out with peas, beans, or even ground acorns to make the flour go further. The finest white bread is for lords, abbots, and the wealthy. For you, the loaf is brown, and filling the crumb close-grained. The grain for this bread has traveled a long path. It was grown, cut, threshed, and winnowed in the fields, carried to the miller who ground it between great stones into flour, and finally mixed with water and a pinch of salt, perhaps leavened with a little sourdough starter, saved from the last bake. Baking is done in the communal oven, each household kneading their dough at home and bringing it to be baked in turn. Payment is often in kind, a portion of the bread, or a small fee to the keeper of the oven. Bread is rarely eaten alone. Pottage, the eternal stew of the medieval peasant, is your other staple. It is not a recipe so much as a concept, a pot set to simmer over the fire all day, into which goes whatever is available. Cabbage, leeks, onions, beans, peas, herbs from the garden, maybe a few strips of salted meat or bones for flavor. In the morning, you might eat yesterday's pottage warmed through. At night, you'll add fresh ingredients and let it bubble again for hours. Over time, the flavors deepen into a kind of rich earthiness that is as familiar as your own hands. Meat is precious and rarely the centerpiece of a meal. You might have a small piece of pork or mutton once or twice a week if you are fortunate, more often in winter after the autumn slaughter. Fresh meat is eaten quickly before it spoils. The rest is salted, smoked, or dried to make it last. Fish plays a bigger role, especially on the many days when the church forbids meat. If you live near a river or coast, you might have fresh fish. Inland, it's more likely to be salted herring, dried cod, or pickled eels. Eggs from your chickens and geese are a welcome addition when they are laying. Cheese, too, is a mainstay, soft and fresh in summer, harder and sharper in winter as the milk dwindles. Butter appears on the table less often, as much of the milk is needed for cheese-making or for drinking. Vegetables form the bulk of your diet. Cabbage is king-hardy, reliable, and filling. Leeks, onions, and garlic are staples alongside beans and peas. Turnips, parsnips, and carrots, often pale and knobbly compared to modern ones, fill out the pottage. In summer, you eat these fresh. In winter, they come from the storehouse or cellar, where they've been packed in straw or sand to keep them from freezing or rotting. Fruit is seasonal and fleeting. In late summer and early autumn, you might gorge on apples, pears, plums, or berries, drying some for later, or preserving them in honey if you have enough. In winter, the only fruit you'll see is dried apples shriveled to leathery discs, a few precious figs or raisins if you can get them. Herbs and spices are used, though spices for a villager mean mostly what you can grow: parsley, sage, thyme, dill, mint. True imported spices, pepper, cinnamon, cloves, are rare and expensive, more likely to appear at the manor or in the priest's kitchen than in your own. Salt, though vital, is costly too, and used carefully, often purchased from traveling merchants or collected in certain coastal regions. Sweetness comes almost entirely from honey. It flavors ale, enriches pottage, and sweetens the occasional special cake or tart. Sugar exists, but it is an exotic luxury beyond the reach of most villagers. Drinks are simple. Water is taken from the well, though it can sometimes be dubious in quality. Ale is the everyday drink, brewed weak for daily use and stronger for feasts. It is nourishing as well as thirst-quenching, and brewing it is part of the rhythm of household work. Cider appears in apple-growing regions, mead where honey is plentiful. Milk is drunk fresh when available, but more often turned into butter or cheese before it spoils. Meals follow the day's labor. In the morning, you break your fast with leftover bread, perhaps spread with a little cheese or dipped in warm ale. Midday is the main meal, eaten when the sun is high. Bread, pottage, and whatever small extras you have: a hard-boiled egg, a slice of salted fish, a handful of fresh greens. In the evening, after work is done, you return to the hearth for more pottage and bread, perhaps with a bit of ale to wash it down. Feasts are the exception moments, when the table groans under more than the daily fare. At Christmas, Easter, or the harvest feast, you might enjoy roasted goose-spiced pudding, or a rich pie stuffed with meat and dried fruit. These meals are not just about food, but about the rare joy of abundance, a reminder that life can offer sweetness as well as toil. Food preparation is constant work. Grain must be ground, vegetables gathered and washed, meat, preserved bread, kneaded, pottage stirred. There is no cooking day. Every day is cooking day. The fire must be tended, wood chopped, water fetched, pots scrubbed with handfuls of sand or ash. In summer, the kitchen garden demands daily attention. In winter, the challenge is keeping food from freezing solid or spoiling in the damp. Eating is rarely solitary. Meals are shared with family, sometimes with neighbors. always with the knowledge that food is the fruit of the whole community's labor. The bread you tear was milled by the miller, baked in the shared oven. The cheese owes its existence to the milk from the cows you helped feed. Every mouthful is part of a network of work and reciprocity. When you finish your evening meal, the hearth glows softly and the air smells of warm bread and wood smoke. You lean back on the bench, hands warmed by your cup, knowing that tomorrow the same routine will begin again, bread pottage and whatever the day's work and the year's fortune provide. It is not a varied diet, but it is sustaining, and in the quiet contentment after a full day, that is enough. Clothing here isn't fashion, at least not in the way you might think of it now. It's protection work gear, a mark of your place in the world, and when you're lucky, a small source of pride. You don't own a wardrobe full of choices. What you have is what you wear day after day, mended and patched, until the fabric nearly gives way. The base of your everyday attire is the tunic. For men, it falls to about the knee. For women, it runs to the ankle. Made from wool, in almost every case, it's cut simply a few rectangles of cloth stitched together with hand-spun thread. Wool is the village's gift, warm even when damp, durable, and readily available from the sheep grazing the fields. In summer, lighter wool or linen is preferred, but for most, linen is a rare luxury grown and processed in smaller quantities. Under the tunic, men wear hose-fitted woolen leggings that tie to a belt, or to the tunic itself, and women wear a long underdress, often of rough linen if they can get it. Both sexes may have a simple shirt or smock next to the skin, usually made from linen, which is softer and easier to wash than wool. But linen is costly, and for many these undergarments are handed down or worn until they're almost transparent with age. Over the tunic, you might have a hood or short cape to ward off rain, or in colder weather, a heavier over-tunic or cloak. Cloaks are often fastened with a simple brooch or pin, and are long enough to wrap around yourself on icy mornings. For working outdoors, you might throw on an apron or a sleeveless overgarment to take the brunt of mud and wear. Footwear is simple but precious. Leather shoes are low-cut, shaped around the foot and fastened with a toggle or lacing. They're not waterproof. A walk through wet grass will soak them through, so in muddy seasons many simply go barefoot to save the shoes. In winter, feet might be wrapped in woolen strips for extra warmth. Boots are rarer, more expensive, and mostly reserved for those who need them for riding or heavy outdoor work. Head coverings are nearly universal. Women cover their hair with a coif veil or wimple, a habit reinforced by both fashion and church expectation. Men often wear a coif too, or a simple felt hat with a wide brim for sun and rain. In winter, hoods with long, trailing liripipes serve both warmth and a bit of flourish. Color is limited by what dyes are available. Unbleached wool gives natural shades of brown, gray, cream, or black. Plant dyes add muted blues, greens, and yellows, richer hues for those who can afford the extra work and materials. Bright scarlet or deep purple. Those belong to the nobility, and the church and sumptuary laws in many places make it clear that such colors are not for peasants. Children are dressed much like small adults. There's no separate child fashion, just smaller tunics, smaller hose, smaller cloaks. As they grow, clothing is let out pieced together, and sometimes built from the salvaged fabric of a parent's worn-out garments. Nothing is wasted. A tunic too frayed for wear becomes patches for another, or rags for cleaning, or even wadding for winter bedding. Making these clothes is a year-round labor. Wool must be sheared from the sheep in spring, then cleaned of dirt and grease. It's carded into fluffy fibers, spun into yarn with a drop spindle or spinning wheel, and woven into cloth on a simple loom. Weaving is often a shared task, women working together, passing the shuttle back and forth, the steady rhythm of the loom joining the village's daily music. Once woven, the cloth may be fulled, pounded, and washed to thicken it, and then cut and sewn by hand into the needed garments. Every stitch is made with care. Every seam represents hours of labor. When the church bells ring on Sunday, the clothing you wear is the sum of months, even years of effort, not just yours, but your households and communities. Clothing also signals your place in the world. A well-made cloak, a tunic of finer wool, a leather belt with an iron buckle, these mark you as more prosperous than your neighbor in a threadbare smock. The reeve or miller might wear better shoes. The priest's robe is of richer cloth. But even the poorest take pride in keeping what they have as neat and whole as possible. A clean tunic on Sunday is a sign of self-respect, no matter how patched it may be. For special occasions, a wedding, a saint's feast, the harvest celebration, you might have one set of best clothes, brighter dyed wool, perhaps a bit of embroidery at the cuffs, or a cap trimmed with fur. These garments are kept wrapped away from smoke and dirt, brought out only for the rare days when the whole village gathers in finery. In winter, clothing becomes your armor against the cold. Layer upon layer of wool, sometimes padded with scraps of cloth or fur, helps you face the wind on the open fields. Gloves are rare but treasured. Mittens of wool or leather are passed down like heirlooms. At night, you might even sleep in some of your clothes, drawing your cloak over the straw bed to keep the frost from your toes. There's a quiet dignity in this way of dressing. Your garments are not disposable, not chosen for novelty. They are made to last, made to serve, and every patch and repair tells a story of work done, seasons endured, and care taken to keep the family clothed against whatever the year brings. As you stand in the yard on a brisk morning, the wool cloak around your shoulders, the hood drawn up against the wind, you feel a kind of kinship with every villager you see. You all share the same palette of colors, the same practical shapes, the same unspoken understanding that clothes are more than what you wear. They are proof that you are prepared to meet the day. Farming might feed the village, but it is the crafts and trades that keep it moving, mended and supplied with what the land alone cannot provide. Even in a place where most people are bound to the rhythm of the fields, there are always a few who spend more of their days with tools in hand than plows or scythes. Their work is essential. Without them, your plow would be useless, your cart unhitched, your home leaking in the next rain. At the heart of these trades is the blacksmith. His forge glows like a second hearth for the village, though his fire burns far hotter. The rhythmic ringing of hammer on anvil carries down the lane like a heartbeat. Inside his small, smoky workshop, the air shimmers with heat, and the smell of hot iron mixes with that of charcoal. He shapes and repairs the tools everyone depends on: plowshares, sickles, scythes, axe heads, nails, hinges. He shoes the village's oxen and horses, fitting iron to hoof with practiced speed. In times of unrest, he might forge spearheads or even a sword for the Lord's men, but in the daily run of life, it's the humble implements that keep his fire lit. Not far away you find the carpenter. He is master of wood in all its forms, shaping wagon wheels, mending broken carts, fashioning yokes for oxen, building barrels to store grain and ale. The scent of fresh-cut oak and pine clings to his workshop, mingling with the sound of saws and the tap of wooden mallets. In a place where wood is as common as earth, the carpenter's skill turns raw timber into the structures and tools that make survival possible. The miller stands apart both literally and socially. His mill, whether turned by water wheel or the long sails of a windmill, is the gateway between grain and bread. Every family brings their harvested wheat, barley, or rye here to be ground into flour. The miller takes his payment in kind, keeping a share of the grain as toll. It's an arrangement that sometimes breeds suspicion. Millers have long been accused of taking more than their fair share. But without him, no one eats bread. His mill is a constant hum in the village's background, the grinding stones turning the grain pouring into sacks, the flour dust rising in pale clouds. There is also the cooper, whose work rarely draws attention until you realize how vital his barrels, tubs, and buckets are. His hoops and staves hold ale for brewing salted meat, for storage water from the well grain, from the harvest. Without watertight barrels, half the village's preservation methods would collapse. The cooper's skill lies in coaxing curved planks to fit perfectly, the iron hoops holding them tight against leakage. In homes across the village, spinning wheels and looms hum under the hands of weavers. Wool is carded and spun into yarn, then woven into cloth, a craft done mostly by women in the home, though some men take up weaving as a trade. In winter, when the fields rest, the steady shuttle of the loom becomes a familiar sound. The weaver's work might end with plain cloth for tunics and cloaks, or with patterned weaves for those who can afford something finer. Dyeing cloth is another skill, using plants like woad, for blue madder, for red weld, for yellow. The dyer's yard is a place of bright vats and pungent smells, a little pocket of color in a brown and gray world. The potter's work is equally humble but necessary. Clay dug from nearby pits is shaped on the wheel into jugs, bowls, and cooking pots. These vessels carry water-hold pottage over the fire, store ale and milk. Unglazed pottery is porous and cheap glazed ware more expensive and reserved for those who can afford it. When a pot breaks, and they do often, the shards might be repurposed to scrape hides, wedge doors, or line drainage channels. The thatcher too has his place, a man whose skill keeps the rain off every head in the village. Thatching is an art of layering straw or reeds, so they shed water, binding them tight with ropes or wooden pegs. A good thatcher can make a roof last 20 years. A bad one leaves you with leaks after the first hard rain. Some trades travel rather than settle. Peddlers pass through selling needles, ribbons, pots, and salt goods that can't be made locally or are too costly to produce here. Tinkers mend broken kettles and pans. Even the occasional wandering smith or carpenter might offer services before moving on. Their arrival is a small event, a chance to see something new, to trade news from beyond the parish boundary. All these trades are bound together in a network of mutual reliance. The blacksmith needs the cooper's barrel for his water trough. The cooper needs the carpenter's tools. The carpenter depends on the blacksmith for nails and hinges. The miller's toll flour feeds the baker, whose bread feeds the smith. The weaver sells cloth to the thatcher in need of a new hood. The thatcher works on the potter's house in exchange for glazed jugs. No one here works in isolation. Even the most skilled tradesman will spend part of the year in the fields, lending his back to the plow, or his hands to the harvest. And every farmer will at some point be in the smith's doorway, the carpenter's shed, the miller's yard, waiting for the work that will carry them through another season. These crafts are not luxuries. They are the gears in the machine of village life. Without them, the fields might still grow wheat, but no one could cut it, thresh it, mill it, bake it, or store it properly. The men and women of these trades keep the village from sliding backward into a life of bare subsistence, giving it tools, containers, roofs, and clothing, in short, giving it the means to survive. And as you walk back from the smithy, the clang of his hammer still in your ears, you begin to understand that the village is as much a web of skills as it is a cluster of houses. Each trade is a thread strong in itself, but stronger woven together. And you, whether farmer, weaver, cooper, or smith, are part of that weave. In a village like this, there is no police force patrolling the lanes, no courthouse with robed judges, no distant government you can appeal to at will. Justice is local, personal, and woven into the authority of the manor. The Lord's word, or more precisely, the word of his appointed officers, is law. And while the village lives by custom as much as by written rule, everyone knows where those boundaries lie. The manor court is the beating heart of this system, held a few times a year, sometimes more often. If the Lord demands it, gathers the villagers in the great hall of the manor or in fair weather out on the green. The hall smells faintly of rushes and smoke, its timbered roof high above the long benches and trestle tables. At the head sits the steward representing the absent lord. He is flanked by clerks who keep records in careful script, their ink-stained fingers scratching across parchment. Attendance is not optional. Every household is expected to send a representative, often the head of the family. The court deals with everything from petty disputes to serious breaches of the peace. Land boundaries are confirmed, inheritance claims settled, grazing rights clarified. If your neighbor lets his pigs root in your garden, if someone takes more than his share of firewood from the common, if two families quarrel over who has the right to use a certain strip of land, this is where it's resolved. For many of these cases, the emphasis is on restoring order rather than punishing harshly. Fines are the most common outcome, a set number of pennies or payment in kind, if coin is scarce. Sometimes, an offender is ordered to make good the damage, repairing a broken fence, returning stolen grain, compensating a neighbor for a lost chicken. There are also duties to be recorded and enforced. The court keeps track of who owes labor to the Lord, how many days in the fields, how many cartloads of hay, how much wood to be cut from the forest. Failure to meet these obligations is treated seriously. A warning might be given once. After that, fines increase sharply, and repeated defiance risks the loss of your holding. Serious crimes, theft, assault, even murder fall under a different jurisdiction, often passing to the king's courts or the sheriff. But the manor court may still be the first to hear of them. The tithing system plays its part here. Villagers are grouped into tithings of 10 households, each responsible for the good behavior of its members. If someone in your tithing commits a crime, it is partly your responsibility to present them to the court. Failing to do so can bring penalties on the whole group. Punishments for serious offenses can be grim. Stocks or pillories are sometimes used for public humiliation, set in the open so everyone passing by can jeer or throw rotten vegetables. Floggings may be carried out in front of the gathered villagers. In extreme cases, criminals might be branded, have an ear cropped, or even be hanged, though executions are usually carried out under royal rather than manorial authority. The church has its own court system dealing with moral and spiritual matters, disputes over marriage, accusations of adultery, failure to pay tithes, slander, or even heresy. Penalties here might include public penance, fasting, pilgrimage, or fines payable to the church. It is possible and not uncommon for a villager to answer to both the manor and the church for different parts of the same offense. Much of this justice is based on reputation. A good name in the village carries weight. A known troublemaker will find less sympathy when disputes arise. Oaths play a central role in proving innocence or truthfulness sworn on holy relics or before respected neighbors. In some cases, compurgators, people who swear to your good character, can tip the scales in your favor. Even so, justice is not blind. Those with influence, the reeve, the miller, a wealthy free tenant may find the court more willing to see their side. A poor cottager with few friends risks harsher penalties for the same offense. This is simply understood as the way of things, though it can breed quiet resentments. The reeve chosen from among the villagers stands at the intersection of authority and community. He is responsible for making sure the Lord's orders are carried out, rents and dues collected, and labor services fulfilled. He also acts as a kind of foreman in the fields, overseeing work on the domain, the land directly controlled by the Lord. The reeve's role gives him power, but also makes him a target for complaints. Balancing the demands of the manor with the goodwill of the village is a delicate task. At the smallest level, many disputes never reach the manor court. Neighbors settle them directly, sometimes with the help of respected elders. A chicken wandering into a garden might be returned with a firm word. A broken tool borrowed in haste might be replaced quietly without fuss. The cost of formal complaint can be more trouble than it's worth, and peace in a small community is fragile enough without dragging every quarrel before the steward. Still, when the day of the manor court arrives, the village gathers. News is exchanged, grievances aired, verdicts given. Some leave lighter of purse but satisfied that their rights have been upheld. Others leave muttering about unfairness. Either way, the decisions stand, and life returns to its steady rhythm until the next summons is read out, the bell rung, and the court convenes again. In a place like this, law is not a distant abstraction. It is the hand that keeps the village together, the thread that mends disputes before they tear wider. Whether it feels fair or not, it is as much a part of your life here as the turning of the seasons or the tolling of the church bell. And tomorrow you will still pass your neighbors on the lane, still tend your strip of land, still live within the web of rules that has held this village for generations. In the medieval village, good health is not something you take for granted. It's something you hold on to for as long as fortune allows. Illness can creep in quietly or strike without warning, and with no hospitals, no trained doctors nearby, and no real understanding of germs. Your chances of recovery often depend on a mix of folk remedies, faith, and the stubborn resilience of your own body. The first line of defense is your own household. Most families keep a store of herbal knowledge passed down through generations. What plants to use for a fever, which roots to boil for a stubborn cough, what leaves to steep when the stomach aches. In summer, the hedgerows and meadows become your pharmacy, yarrow for wounds, mint for digestion, elderflower for colds, comfrey for sprains. Herbs are gathered, dried, and hung in bundles from the rafters, ready for the winter months when green life is scarce. Wounds are washed in ale or vinegar to cleanse them, then bound with linen strips. Poultices of bread and milk or mashed herbs are applied to swellings. Honey is valued for its soothing, healing properties, not just as food, but as medicine. For fever, you might be wrapped in blankets to sweat out the illness. For chills, warmed by hot stones wrapped in cloth. These remedies sometimes help, and sometimes don't. Beyond the household, there may be one or two women in the village who are known for their healing skill. They are midwives, herbalists, and wise women called upon to tend the sick, deliver babies, and prepare salves or tonics. Their knowledge comes from experience, observation, and inherited tradition, and while it's not magic, it can be the difference between life and death in a place without physicians. Yet their role is precarious. Too much success or too mysterious a cure can bring whispers of witchcraft in troubled times. The church plays its part too. Priests may not know medicine, but they know the rites for blessing the sick hearing confession and preparing souls for the possibility of death. Holy water relics of saints and prayers are offered as much for healing as for comfort. Illness here is often seen as a trial of faith, a punishment for sin, or a mysterious working of God's will. Pilgrimage to a shrine is not uncommon if someone is chronically ill, though leaving the village for such a journey is no small undertaking. Cleanliness is limited by the tools and time you have. Bathing is infrequent, especially in cold months, though washing the hands and face is part of the morning routine. Clothes are washed less often than you might imagine. Water must be fetched and heated, soap is scarce, and scrubbing linen in icy streams is not a task anyone rushes to do. Still, people know the difference between clean and foul, and will change rushes on the floor, sweep out rubbish, and keep the hearth area as tidy as work allows. Sickness can sweep through the village like a shadow. Colds, fevers, stomach ailments, these are common enough. But worse things appear without warning. The dreaded ague with its shaking chills, coughing fits that last for weeks. The wasting fevers that take the young as easily as the old. Wounds from work or accident can turn deadly if they fester. Childbirth is a dangerous passage for both mother and child. A moment of misfortune can turn joy into mourning. And then there are the great visitations, plague pox, and other contagions that arrive with terrifying speed. You've heard tales of whole villages emptied in weeks, of churchyards filled faster than graves can be dug. In such times, fear drives people apart. Friends may avoid the sick, and even family might keep their distance, not understanding how illness travels, but knowing that it can leap from one household to another like wildfire. Nutrition plays a role in health, though no one speaks of it in those terms. In good years, when the harvest is plentiful, people are stronger, wounds heal faster, and sickness seems less severe. In bad years, when bread is scarce and vegetables are few, bodies weaken, and the smallest ailment can turn fatal. Malnutrition is an invisible predator lurking at the edge of every poor harvest. When a person dies, and in the village death is always near, the body is prepared at home, washed and laid out for neighbors to visit and pay respects. The priest conducts the burial, and the whole community gathers, for in a small place every loss is felt. Death is part of life here spoken of with resignation rather than shock. Children are especially vulnerable. Many do not survive their first years, falling victim to fevers, infections, or accidents. Those who do survive to adulthood are considered hardy, forged in a constant battle against sickness. But even the strong can be struck down suddenly. A twisted ankle can become a festering wound. A cough can deepen into something that robs the breath for good. And yet life goes on. People recover sometimes unexpectedly. A fever breaks, a wound heals, a baby survives against the odds. When health returns, it is cherished all the more for its fragility. There's a deep understanding in the village that well-being is a gift, one to be guarded, but never taken for granted. In this world, you live with sickness as you live with rain and winter, not something you can banish, but something you endure, trusting in skill in God, in luck, and in the strength of your own body to see you through to the next sunrise. And if you wake feeling strong with the sun warm on your face and your limbs ready for work, you carry that strength into the day, knowing how easily it might be gone tomorrow. Childhood. In your medieval village is short, far shorter than you might expect. There is no long stretch of years given over solely to play and learning. From the moment you can walk without being carried, you begin the slow but steady march toward work. Childhood here is less an age and more a brief apprenticeship to life. The youngest years are spent close to the home under the watchful eyes of mother, older siblings, or neighbors. Babies are swaddled in cloth to keep them warm and to limit their movements, though not for as long or as tightly as in some wealthier households. Toddlers are carried in slings or set down on rush-covered floors to crawl and toddle about, exploring whatever the one-room home offers. There are no toy chests, but scraps of wood stones, feathers, and bits of fabric serve just as well in sparking curiosity. By the time a child can walk confidently, they are already helping in small ways. They fetch kindling, carry water in small wooden cups from the bucket, shoo chickens from the doorway, or help spread fresh rushes on the floor. Tasks are given with patience, but with an underlying seriousness. Every extra pair of hands counts, even if the hands are small. Children learn not in classrooms, but by shadowing their elders. A boy might follow his father into the fields, holding the handles of a wooden rake, too large for him pretending to work, while learning the rhythm of sowing and weeding. A girl might stand at her mother's side as she stirs the pottage, handed small scraps to chop with a dull knife, learning the steps of a recipe without ever writing it down. Skills are taught in the doing, not in the telling. Games exist, of course, woven into the fabric of the day. Pebbles become counters in a game of tally. A ring of rope is tossed over a stick driven into the ground. Children chase each other in the lanes, staging mock battles with sticks, for swords, weaving daisy chains, in spring sliding on frozen ponds in winter. Songs and rhymes pass between them like secret treasures, some with meanings so old, even the parents no longer understand the words. Formal schooling is rare. In some villages, the priest or a clerk might teach a handful of boys to read and write Latin. Usually those destined for the church or service in a lord's household. Girls almost never receive this education, though they may learn enough to read a prayer or sign their name if they are lucky. For most children, letters and numbers are mysteries, and the spoken word carries the weight of knowledge. Work begins in earnest surprisingly early. By 7 or 8, boys may be given steady tasks in the fields, scaring birds from the grain, fetching tools, leading oxen during plowing. Girls of the same age tend younger siblings, spin wool on small spindles, help churn butter and weed gardens. There is no clear moment when a child becomes a worker. The transition happens so gradually that no one remarks on it. By their early teens, children are expected to pull their full weight. Boys may work long days alongside men during haymaking, or harvest, swinging a sickle or binding sheaves. Girls take on the heavier domestic work, baking bread, carrying heavy water buckets, mending clothes. Many also work in the fields during peak seasons, their hands raw from pulling weeds or gathering crops. Some children leave the village altogether. Boys may be apprenticed to a trade in a nearby town, blacksmithing, carpentry, weaving bound to a master for years in exchange for food shelter. and training. Girls might enter service in a wealthier household, working as maids, kitchen hands, or nursemaids sending part of their wages home. These departures are bittersweet, a chance for a better future, but also a loss to the family's daily labor. There is little talk of teenage years as a distinct stage of life. Once you are strong enough to work like an adult, you are treated as one. Young people marry early by modern standards, late teens for women, a little later for men, though many wait until they can support a household of their own. Courtship is simple, often bound up in the rhythms of daily work. You notice someone while working side by side at harvest at the communal oven, or during feast days when the village gathers to sing and dance. Childhood in the medieval village carries both freedom and burden. Freedom because children roam the lanes and fields without the constant oversight of adults. Their playground is the whole parish, their games as wild as their imaginations allow. Burden because every game is played in the shadow of work, waiting to be done, and every idle moment is borrowed from tasks that someone else must finish. And yet, for all its hardships, medieval childhood has its moments of unfiltered joy. The first bite of a ripe apple from the village orchard, the thrill of climbing to the top of a haystack, the laughter of running through summer rain, the pride in catching your first fish from the stream. These are not luxuries, they are small, shining sparks in the steady rhythm of labor and learning. By the time a child reaches adulthood, they are already deeply skilled in the work of survival. They know how to plant and harvest, spin and sow, tend animals, repair tools, read the signs of the weather, and keep a fire burning through the night. They are not preparing for life, they have been living it all along. In this way, the medieval village raises its young not just to grow, but to endure. And as you watch a group of children chasing each other across the green sticks, clashing in imaginary battle, you can see the next generation learning, laughing, and without knowing it, stepping into the roles their parents now fill. Life in the medieval village is ruled by the turning of the seasons, and though most of those turns bring work, each also carries its own moments of celebration. These are the times when the village steps away, however briefly, from its daily toil, when the tools are set aside, the animals left to graze on their own, and the air fills with music, laughter, and the smell of cooking fires. Spring arrives with a sense of relief after the long, lean months of winter. The thaw brings mud, yes, but also green shoots pushing through the soil, the first lambs tottering on unsteady legs, and the promise of fresh food after weeks of relying on stored grain and salted meat. Around this time you might see the celebration of May Day, when the village green is decorated with flowers and greenery, and a tall maypole is erected, its ribbons fluttering in the breeze. People dance in circles around it, weaving the ribbons into colorful patterns. The young men compete in games of strength and agility, while the women sing and watch. For a day, the whole village seems to bloom alongside the hedgerows. Summer's festivals often tie directly to the church calendar. Midsummer, around the feast of St. John, is marked with bonfires on the green, or on nearby hills lighting up the warm night sky. Some leap through the flames for luck. Others simply gather around them, telling stories or singing until the embers die down. The warmth of the season brings more than work in the fields. It brings long evenings when the lanes echo with voices long after sunset. Autumn holds the great harvest feast, one of the most important celebrations of the year. After weeks of back-breaking work, the grain is safely stored, the haystacks rise high and the barns are full. The entire village shares in the relief. Animals are slaughtered for winter meat, and some of the fresh meat is eaten at once in a rare show of abundance. There is ale and plenty bread made from the new grain, and dishes of vegetables, fruit, and whatever the season has provided. Music plays, feet stomp in time to the beat, and for a few nights, even the poorest eat until they are full. Winter's festivals are different in nature, more about warmth and light in the cold and dark. The 12 days of Christmas are a season in themselves, beginning with the church, decorated in greenery and ringing with hymns. On Christmas Day, families share what they can, goose or pork, if the year has been good pottage, and bread if it has not. The evening may see mummers' plays in the village, simple performances of saints' tales or comic scenes acted out by masked villagers. Twelfth night at the end of the season often brings a final burst of festivity before work resumes in earnest. Alongside these larger feasts are smaller, more local celebrations. The feast day of the village's patron saint may bring a procession through the lanes, banners carried high, relics displayed in the church. Rogation days in spring see the priest leading the villagers around the boundaries of the parish, blessing the fields for a good harvest. The yearly fair, if the village has one, transforms the green into a marketplace and meeting ground. Traders from outside bring goods not usually seen: bright cloth, pewterware, spices, even the occasional luxury like a painted cup. Leisure outside of festivals is rare but not absent. On Sunday afternoons after Mass, you might see games played on the green: wrestling matches, tug of war, or camp ball, a rough early form of football, with few rules and much enthusiasm. In quieter corners, men play dice or simple board games carved into wooden boards or scratched into the earth. Women might sit together spinning wool, their hands working as their voices weave gossip and stories. Storytelling is its own form of entertainment, especially in the long winter evenings. By the firelight, you hear tales of saints, of great battles of Arthur, and his knights of outlaws in the greenwood. Some are cautionary, some romantic, some simply meant to pass the time. Songs accompany the stories, ballads of love and loss, work songs with steady rhythms, carols at Christmastide. Even those who cannot play an instrument can clap in time or join the chorus. These moments of leisure are precious because they are scarce. Most days are spent in labor from sunrise to sunset, and idleness is frowned upon unless the weather or the calendar itself forbids work. But when the time for celebration comes, it is embraced with full heart. Clothing is washed and mended beforehand, children are scrubbed clean, and the best cloak or tunic is brought out from its chest. Feasts and games do more than break the monotony, they knit the village together. They remind everyone in ways work never can that they are part of something larger than their own household. Shared laughter, shared music, shared meals. These are the ties that bind neighbors as firmly as the shared work of harvest or the obligations of the manor court. As you watch the dancers circle the maypole or the children dart between the tables at the harvest feast, you feel the undercurrent of something ancient. The same songs have been sung for generations, the same games played on the same patch of grass, the same prayers offered under the same roof of the village church. These traditions are not just for joy, they are a link to the past and a promise that in some form they will carry on into the future. Faith is not a separate compartment of life here, it's the thread woven through everything you do. In your medieval village, religion is not just about Sunday worship. It is a daily presence, a set of rhythms and rituals that mark the passing of the hours, the turning of the seasons, and the key moments of every life. The church is the most substantial building in the village, its stone walls standing firm even when wooden houses lean and sag. Its bell is the voice of time itself, ringing out for mass, for funerals, for feast days, for emergencies. You hear it in the fields, in the yard, by the hearth, and you know what it calls you to. It tells you when to come together, when to pray, when to stop work. Sunday Mass is the anchor of the week. The whole village gathers the air inside the church, cool and faintly scented with beeswax and incense. Men stand to one side, women to the other, children grouped near the front. The priest speaks and sings in Latin, a language most do not understand, but the ritual itself is familiar. You know when to bow, when to kneel, when to cross yourself. The rhythm of the liturgy is as predictable as the seasons, and it binds the community together in shared gesture and sound. The Christian calendar shapes the year. Lent brings weeks of fasting and restraint before the joy of Easter. Advent marks the quiet build-up to Christmas. Feast days of saints dot the months, each with its own traditions, a procession's special prayers, sometimes a fair or communal meal. The great festivals, Christmas, Easter, Pentecost, are more than religious observances. They are social high points, moments when the sacred and the communal blend seamlessly. Religion also governs daily life in subtle but constant ways. Meatless days every Friday, and often Wednesday too, change the household menu. Prayers are said before and after meals. Work pauses for the Angelus bell ringing in the morning, at noon, and in the evening. Blessings are given for the fields at rogation tide, for livestock, for new buildings, for travelers setting out on the road. The church calendar is both a spiritual guide and a practical organizer of time. Every major life event is marked with religious ritual. A child's first journey beyond the home is to the church for baptism, often within days of birth. Marriage vows are spoken before the altar, the union blessed in the presence of God and neighbors alike. Death brings the tolling of the bell, the solemn procession to the churchyard, the prayers for the soul's safe passage to the afterlife. In these moments, the church is not just a building, it is the heart of the community's shared life. Confession is another part of the rhythm. At certain times of year, and sometimes more often, villagers are expected to confess their sins to the priest, seeking absolution. This is not only about spiritual cleansing, it is also a means of social order, a way of keeping the peace in a small community where grudges can fester if left unchecked. For many, faith offers comfort in a world full of uncertainty. The dangers of illness, poor harvests, storms, and accidents are constant, and the church offers explanations and remedies rooted in belief. A poor yield might be seen as God's chastisement, a good harvest as His blessing. Pilgrimage to a holy shrine, perhaps to the tomb of a saint, known for healing, is an act of both devotion and hope for tangible aid. The sacred and the superstitious often blend. Holy water is sprinkled to bless homes and fields. Charms are worn to ward off evil. Relics of saints are treasured, believed to hold power. The boundary between the official teaching of the church and the folk beliefs of the villagers is porous, and both live comfortably side by side in daily practice. The priest holds a unique place in the village. He is often the only literate man, the keeper of written records, the mediator in disputes, the moral authority in matters both public and private. His sermons shape how the community understands its world, and his blessing is sought for all important undertakings. Yet he is also a neighbor sharing in the same food shortages, the same weather, the same worries about the harvest. His position is respected, but his humanity is plain to see. Religion also reaches beyond the village through its ties to the wider church. Taxes in the form of tithes, a tenth of produce or earnings, are paid to support the parish and the diocese. Monks and friars sometimes visit, bringing news, preaching, or seeking alms. These visits remind you that your small parish is part of a vast network stretching across Christendom, from your thatched roof church to the great cathedrals of far-off cities. In this world, there is no division between sacred time and daily time. The same hands that turn the soil also clasp in prayer. The same voices that sing work songs also chant hymns. Religion is not a Sunday garment you put on once a week. It is the very cloth your life is cut from, woven tightly into every act, every season, every gathering of the village. And as you leave the church after Mass, the bells still echoing in your ears, you step back into the sunlight with the sense that the day, the work, and the life ahead are all under the watchful gaze of God. The sacred and the ordinary walk side by side here and in your village. They always will. The year here is not counted in months on a page, but in the feel of the air, the color of the fields, and the work in your hands. It is a living wheel turning endlessly, each season pushing into the next, with work that has been done the same way for generations. By walking through it, you begin to understand the village as it truly is not a place fixed in time, but a rhythm you step into. It begins, as all years do, in the deep of winter. The days are short, the nights long and cold. The fields lie quiet under frost, the hedgerows bare. You tend the animals close to home, rationing hay and grain, mending tools and clothes by the fire. The smell of wood smoke lingers in your hair, and the light from the hearth becomes your sun. Meals are simple pottage bread, cheese, whatever the storeroom can spare. Winter is a time of endurance, of holding steady until the world turns green again. By late February, the first signs of spring whisper through the village. Snowdrops bloom along the lane, the soil softens, and the air carries the scent of damp earth waking from sleep. Lambing begins a season of fragile life when every birth feels like a small victory against the cold months behind you. You prepare the fields for sowing, turning the earth with plow and oxen. The church bells ring for rogation days, blessing the land. You feel the year beginning in earnest, your hands deep in the soil. Spring runs quickly into early summer. The days stretch long, the sun warm on your back as you weed the crops and cut grass for hay. Midsummer arrives with its bonfires and songs. But even the celebration is bound to the work. The fields must be tended, the gardens watched against pests. The animals graze far and wide, and water must be fetched for them. In the heat, in the village doors stand open, and the sound of spinning wheels hums through the warm afternoons. High summer is the calm before the storm. You check the grain daily, watching for the golden flush that tells you it's time. The hay is already stacked in tall mounds, sweet-smelling and safe for the winter to come. Fruit swells on the trees and gardens are heavy with beans, peas, leeks, and cabbages. There is still laughter on the green in the evenings, but the talk turns more and more to the coming harvest. Everyone knows what's ahead. Then the harvest comes, the most important, exhausting, unyielding weeks of the year. From dawn until the last light, you are in the fields. Sickles swing, grain falls, sheaves are bound and stacked. The air is dry with chaff, your hands blistered from the work. Every able-bodied person helps men, women, children, elders. The barns fill slowly, steadily. And when it is done, when the last sheaf is stacked high and the last cart rolls home, the whole village breathes a collective sigh of relief. The harvest feast follows a rare burst of abundance and joy. For a few days, the village forgets its aches and sings late into the night. Autumn is a season of storing and preparing. Grain is threshed and winnowed vegetables laid in cellars, meat salted or smoked. The animals not kept for breeding are slaughtered. The air smells of wood smoke apples and drying herbs. It is a season of both satisfaction and foreboding satisfaction because the work has been done well. Foreboding because you know the wheel will soon bring winter again. By November, the first frost silvers the roofs in the morning. Days' shortened work moves closer to the hearth. Spinning, mending, and brewing fill the hours when fields lie fallow. The church's great festivals begin their approach, Advent leading to Christmas, when the village gathers in the candlelit church, singing hymns as the darkness presses at the windows. And then, as the 12 days of Christmas fade, the wheel turns once more. The frost still clings to the hedgerows, but the first lambs will come soon, and the plow will cut the earth again. You realize there is no true beginning or end, only the passing of each season into the next. In this cycle, there is comfort. You know what comes after winter, after harvest, after the long, slow thaw of spring. The work changes, the light changes, but the pattern endures. The same paths are walked, the same songs sung, the same prayers offered over the same fields. The year is not a ladder to be climbed. It is a circle you walk with your neighbors, your family, and all those who came before. And you standing here in the low winter light, feel the weight and the warmth of that truth. This is not just a year in the medieval village. This is life itself, steady turning, endless. The fire in the hearth has burned low now, the last embers glowing softly in the quiet. Outside the village lies under a hush, no sound, but the slow breathing of animals in their stalls, the faint rustle of wind through bare branches, the gentle drip of water from the eaves. The lanes are empty, their ruts filled with shadow, the green still beneath the moon's pale gaze. You sit in the warm dimness of your small home, wrapped in a cloak that smells faintly of wool and wood smoke. Your hands rest loosely in your lap. The day's labors have faded into memory, their rough edges softened by the stillness of evening. There is no need to think of the work ahead. It will come in its own time as it always has. For now, the world is unhurried, each moment stretching quietly into the next. The air is gentle, carrying the faint scent of herbs hung to dry by the hearth. You hear the creak of the rafters, the soft patter of something small in the thatch above. The rhythm of the village is slower now, each heart at rest, each soul tucked into its corner of the world. You close your eyes and picture the year's cycle turning once more to the thaw of spring, the brightness of summer, the gold of harvest, the still white of winter. You have walked through it all tonight, step by step, season by season, until the pattern feels like a familiar song. The last ember falls to ash, and your breath drifts steady and slow. You are safe here in this place where time turns gently, where the village holds you in its quiet embrace. Sleep now. Tomorrow will wait.